Okay, so now we're going to look at the second part of HR management, and this part is all about exam practice. So we've got this little system working now whereby we do some sort of theory and then we look at the exams. HR management is something, once again, like so much in paper P5, when you're going to sit through the technical stuff and you're going to go, but I know this, why am I doing this? And then you're going to the exam and fail. Paper P5 has the lowest pass rate of any exam whatsoever. So what are we doing here? All the time we're thinking about structure. I'm going to give you a couple of questions now. The first question is called Gibson and Chew, and this is a question I started teaching, must have been like 20 years ago now when I was teaching this. I really wanted to give you this one because this is the epitome of a question where there is nothing in there. It's all completely obvious, and in the exam the average score was about 37% because people did not plan. They did not think about structuring their answer, and they did not make logical and sensible conclusions. So let's have a little look at Gibson and Chew. The question itself is up on the website, so you can download the question, and the answer's there. When you look at the answer, it's just an empty page, you know. This is exactly the challenge that you are facing to get this question. I have to look at this. This question is 25 marks, so to get 13 marks out of this question. And it's really not as easy as it looks. And the problem is it ought to be. So let's have a look at Gibson and Chew. Please download it from my website and please read the question, and then we'll go on. Okay, so golden rules. I hope by now that you've downloaded the question. It's on the website, which should be down there somewhere. Please download the question. I would really strongly recommend you read the question and don't go straight to the answer. Right, what should be going through your mind as you're reading this thing? Structure, structure, structure. So how do I get a structure out of this? Well, here you can use the question to guide you. Right, write a scratch plan. You must write a plan with these things. In these exams, unlike so many other topics, you do actually have time. So write a plan. Get your structure, get your plan, keep you on track. The question will guide you. I don't have a particular model, sorry, I might get the answer now, but I don't have a particular model other than what was on those slides, which is my invention basically, to guide you. So you've got to think of your own structure here. Finally, monitor your time, and please remember this question relevance. You would be astonished at how people go off track on these things. Okay, so let's have a look at part one then. Part one was 12 marks. And it said, and the question asked you, explain the function, operation, and potential benefits of staff appraisal schemes. So I assume that the generic spread across word there is benefits. So they want the functional benefits, operational benefits, and potential benefits. There are 12 marks. So in terms of question analysis, you're looking for 4 marks for each. And in terms of structure, remember, get a plan down on the piece of paper. So you've got 3 headings. One is functional, one is operational, and one is potential benefits. So what's the function? What are we actually trying to do, and what are we going to gain from this? Well, in terms of the functions of the organisation, we will identify and address areas of weaknesses. Now, there's hundreds of them, and you can lift examples. In fact, it's probably better than what I've done here, if you actually lift examples from the question. But what would you expect to see? It's an accountancy practice, so most of us have either worked in an accountancy practice or know in principle how they work. So on a functional level, what are we actually doing all day and every day? Well, we can identify and address areas of weaknesses, and then remember it's 1 point for identification and 1 point for explanation. So having identified the areas of weaknesses, we can address them. So if there are technical issues, if there are practical issues, with auditing, how do you set out an audit schedule? How do you reference an audit file? So therefore, at that functional level, what the firm actually does, identify where there are areas of weaknesses. What are we not doing so well? Identify training courses and development so we can improve our technical skills. Right, let's go through and give you something a little bit more meaty. Right, we can identify and address an areas of weakness. Having identified those, we identify an area of weakness, having identified, we address it. So for example, technical issues may be a problem. We may have a lack of technical issues. Therefore, we can organise some training courses, we can do some ACCA training, we can get Mark or we can get PwC or whoever to come out and do some courses for us. We identify and we address, and then we measure the problems. So therefore, the appraisal process will allow us to do this and allow us to get feedback, right? See how you've developed that point there. Secondly, we can discuss issues. So what kind of issues are there? Are there planning issues? Some smaller practices I've seen, people never know day to day where they're going to be tomorrow. So what problems do we have? How do we address those problems? And this in return will give us more motivated staff. Identifying training courses and identifying development, be it technical auditing, be it time management, be it staff management. All of these things make this basic underlying assumption that there's money for these things. That's at the functional level. So what does the firm do? Now, operational, how does it do it? So we have this organisation and structure within the organisation. So we can better plan our teams. We can put people on teams who get on together, people who like each other's management style. So at an operational level, we use appraisals to get feedback and information to better plan teams. Right, that's your identification point. How do we do that? Well, we do it by matching personalities together, by matching industry groups, so we can have specialists in industry groups. We can better plan the work. Some people work better in a crisis environment, so we have people who come in for emergency investigations. We have people who don't want to do the actual work, who want to be trainers. Better plan our teams, better mix of personalities, better mix of client work, so people who particularly like us have a talent for a particular industry. One thing that used to amaze me about the Big Four is they would go out and hire people who had chemistry degrees, and then they would end up doing banks, whereas the guys who were doing the ICIs of this world and the chemistry plants were people who'd done philosophy. So better plan the technical background of people as well. Right, how do you structure that on your page? We can better plan our teams. How do we better plan our teams? Matching personalities, matching industry interests, matching skills. What will be the result? We will have happier and more motivated staff who hopefully will work more efficiently and will be less likely to leave. We can discover process weaknesses. So what happens is there some problem with, we have to come back from the client 200 miles away to hand the audit files over to the audit manager. Would it be better if the manager was on site? What we found when I was at Keepers and Livebrand was it was better if the tax department staff, rather than sit in the office, went out to the client. Identifying also experience opportunities. Right, you need to go through this process. How do we plan our work? Right, we find that people don't know where they are from one day to another because teams and assignments are always being changed. So let's have a rule that nothing changes within 2 weeks. That enables us to better plan our people. Our people know where they're going. They know when they're coming back from audit assignments, so they can do their washing and go to the bank and see their boyfriends and girlfriends. In addition to that, we can buy air tickets or we can buy train tickets earlier, so they're cheaper. So do you see, you've identified your point, you said what the problem is to the point, you've said how you're going to cure it, and then you've said what the benefit is. And that's what you're looking to do all the way through. You're only probably looking for a couple of points on each area. Right, and the third one was easy, and then this again was your risk here, that if you had just literally started to write without really planning, you would end up with all of the benefits and not really looking at the operations and the functions. But the potential benefits, therefore, you get better motivated staff, which gives you efficiency and retention, so you can put those 2 points together. The staff, therefore, hopefully will see a development plan which will address their personal weaknesses and which will allow their career to grow. And so, assuming that your staff are intelligent and able people, those two things will make them happier and will make them more likely to stay with the firm. So the reputation of the firm kind of internally improves. So the reputation of the firm improves internally, and so on. It says better motivated staff, easier to recruit, and improved performance. So we'll also, if people are working harder and more efficiently, the firm will reach its strategic goals, and we will ultimately be more profitable, or whatever the overall goal is. Presumably, ultimately, the ultimate requirement is to be more profitable. I thought the last one was very easy. Your real danger was that everybody wrote potential benefits and nobody looked at functional and operation. Okay, that was part A, 12 marks. You were writing for 18 minutes there. So the examiner was looking for something. Get your 3 headings in which give you the structure and spread across the 3 areas, because the marker probably has a maximum of 5 or 6 marks for potential benefits. So if it's 5, you can only get 5 for that section, nothing for the others. You're guaranteed to fail. That's why you need the structure. Right, so part number B, therefore, so comment on the apparent appraisal problems. Right, so now look at now breaking the question down. There's 13 marks here. Comment on the apparent appraisal problems and suggest how a successful scheme could be organised and operated so as to address these problems. Right, so you've got two things really. First of all, what is the problems to begin with? So what's happening now? So you're probably looking at 3 or 4 marks just to say, to make some comment. Now look what the examiner wants you to do. He wants you to comment on it. So it's not just a case of lifting from the question. You lift from the question and then you comment. Once again, remember 1 mark for lifting and 1 mark for making the comment. So let's see if we can't get kind of 3 things here. Right, the first thing therefore is that the system clearly isn't working. It's not timetable. It's looking here. Appraisal interviews have been very difficult to fit into our busy schedule. Right, so let's just quote that phrase. Right, now what is the issue? What does that tell you? Well, it tells you therefore that it's not seen as being important and it's not timetabled. So therefore, what's your comment on that? If it's not seen as being important, then people aren't putting any time and effort into it. If they're not putting any time and effort into it, we're not getting the development benefits that are coming out of this. So therefore, it is, to all intents and purposes, a waste of time. So there's one part. Right, we've had to see staff at random, and when the appraisal interview could be organised, that's kind of more of the same idea then. And the appraisal scheme has taken up far more of our time than we first thought. Right, there's 2 things there. So the first thing is that either that the people have not bought into the process itself. You know, if you have to do an extra couple of days on an audit, nobody thinks that that's unusual, or they balk at that. So if you have to do an extra hour on this, why is it such a big issue? So people have not just bought into the idea of it, is the most likely thing, or it's overly bureaucratic. So therefore we need to review the process and we need to make sure that it needs to be more straightforward or more valued. We know for a fact that some of the problems in performance that we pointed out to staff during the appraisal interview have been totally ignored. So once again, people aren't taking it, aren't seeing this as important. People are not seeing this as a key feature of their working lives. And there presumably is some kind of follow-up on this, that it's been noted, but we need a system that comes in and that it sells itself to the staff. And the staff, therefore, presumably, it's not being done in such a way that the staff want to do it. If I got told as a teacher, well, Mark, you're very, very good at teaching, but you're very, very bad at writing notes or something, then I would want to go on a training course to learn how to write notes, because my personal feeling is I want to evolve and change. And I'm working for ABC organisation at the moment, but in 2 months' time it'll be XYZ, and in a year's time who knows what country in the world I'll be in. So your current system, pick 3 things from the question. I think 3 is enough. Say what those 3 things are. You can quote them from the question. You can actually use the exact words. And then you need to explain why it's a problem for the organisation. So it's taking up more time than we thought. That's telling you, therefore, that people are not committed to the process and or it's overly bureaucratic. Some staff see the interview as an opportunity to complain or ask for things. Once again, therefore, it should be a process of to and fro, where we judge people, but we also show how they can improve and move forward, and those people should have the opportunity to, in a positive sense, suggest what's going to happen. Right, you should be able to get 3 things there, and then copy them from the question, but then add a little bit of a bump about why it's important, and then say what the effect is for the organisation. Because it says comment on the apparent appraisal problem, so you need to make that comment. Just copying things out of the question is not enough. And you're looking at 3 or 4 sentences for each one, including the one that you copy out. Time management, question structure. Again, so important. So the first part of the question asks you to comment on the apparent problems. The second part now is asking you for organised and operated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this kind of standard structure where we talk a little bit about the theory and then we apply it. And that's how I'm going to answer this part of organised and operated. So I'm probably, again, only looking for something like 4 or 5 marks here. But I've just picked up this slide we've got here. So therefore, what you're going to say is that your standard process in terms of organisation, if you want to put it that way, should be set out in the 2 sections. And this is straight from the slide. Control and development. So control. As part of it, what we're going to do is there will be an element of judgment, but we're going to go moving forward. We're going to so that element of judgment will be performance against your target, which is one of the four there. Going forward, we will then set some strategic objectives. What is it that you're actually trying to do? So we want you to get more experience on insurance company audits or investment fund audits, something like that. There will be some measurable targets. You need to manage the work of 2 or 3 members of staff. You need to bring these 2 small jobs in under budget to show that you can manage a project. So we've got some measurable targets. And then finally, organisation performance. We want to see you contributing to the overall profitability of the organisation, trying to bring in some new business. So whatever we think. So you've got 4 things there. I think actually I've put them in the wrong order. So let's let performance against targets would be 1. And then we're going to set you some targets, and those targets are, and just make a sensible comment. Set some strategic objectives. So the strategic objective is to grow revenue by 50%. So we want to see you bringing in some clients or recommending some extra work. Measurable targets, managing 2 members of staff, bringing in a couple of small audits or small accounts prep pieces of work against the budget. That's nice and measurable. Passing your ACCA exams. And then organisational performance, I think we've kind of touched on as well with strategic objectives. For the development, we will give you the backup. We will give you some time, maybe even just a couple of days at home to do some reading. We will give you some admin time to do some technical work, and we will send you on some wonderful ACCA courses with the worldwide renowned Mark to get you up to the edge. Right, that's a theoretical argument which in your expansion you have applied to the question. Very, very easy. There's 6 things on that slide. You're probably only looking for 3 or 4 to get the marks. Nice and easy. Again, it seems to me, when you read the answer, if you're just going forward, answer, oh, knew that. Yes, you did it. Congratulations, you knew it. What you didn't know was how to structure it and get it on the piece of paper in such a way to get 51%. Right, so the third part of the question, and how are you going to actually operate it? Those words organise and operate are very, very close. So I took the organised work to be what's actually going to happen in the process, and then operated, we're going to treat this as a sort of a management, as a sort of project management exercise. So in terms of that project management exercise, what we'll do therefore is we'll set up a committee to organise the thing. They will send out the rules, regulations, guidelines and so on. Timetables will be set, which managers will be allowed to feed back on, but should be expected to met. If they're not met, then there will be some sort of punishment scale. So it has to be organised between, because you want the staff going to the manager saying we've got to do this, and the manager's going to the staff saying we've got to do this. You'll look on there that it says gain the support from the 2 senior partners. So the 2 senior partners have to stand together on this. This is important. If they lead from the front, then the rest of the staff will follow. Right, and then we've talked about the timetable, and we will link the results to salary, promotion and reward. Also, there will be some sort of feedback. There should be a dashboard that shows all the members of staff and who their managers are, who's done this and who hasn't done this. So it's almost a sort of public naming and shaming. And then in the future, we need to measure the results. Are we seeing better technical knowledge? Are we seeing improved sales? Right, your organisation. Once again, you're probably looking for 4 or 5 marks, so you're looking for 3 things. Treat it as project management. You're always looking for structures. Treat this as project management. What's important in project management? You have timetable/work plan. We have stated objectives. We should start with stated objectives, actually come first, shouldn't it? Then you have your steering committee. Then you have your work plan. You get the support of senior management. You have a communication strategy, and then you have monitoring and feedback. Very, very simple Prince 2 approach. Measure the results. Your project management gives you your structure. Right, that was an incredibly simple question. I don't think any of you have learned anything technical whatsoever doing that question, and it got something like a 25 to 30% pass rate in the real exam. Why was it done so badly? Because everybody thought they knew everything, and nobody had any structure, and nobody stayed on plan, and my guess, nobody wrote a bloody report either. Right. Once again, what I want you to learn from all of this is the structure. How do you answer the question? Because you know the answer, but you've got to get it on the page in the right format. Right, that was Gibson and Chew. It was an ACCA exam from about 1996, 1998, something like that, in the old strategy paper. Again, 25 marks. Go read the question, go read the answer. So the second question that I want you to look at is called Lincoln and Lincoln, and you'll see now how the remuneration policy and so on gets joined into other questions. So it's only actually part C that's relevant here, but Lincoln and Lincoln is another great question. It comes from, I don't know, what year does it come from? It comes from July 12. No, it doesn't. It comes from December 12, and December 12 is the new examiner. So the first part of the question is all about ratio analysis. Now, we've already shown you one question about ratio analysis. Now, what is the most important thing of all? You should be sick to death of this by now. Structure, structure, structure. So I'm not going to do a big, long question on ratio analysis for you, but look at it. It's worth 10 marks, and you've got 3 regional offices. So therefore, you are looking at something like 3 or 4 marks for each office. So what have we got? North, east, and west. So what's going through your mind? What are the standards that we've got here? We've got some sort of net income, we've got operating profit, they even given to you, look at this, your basic calculations are actually done for you. And then your current ratio and your receivables days. So in fact, now look at this is such a good question for Alex Watts, who's the current examiner, because what he's done for you is he's done the calculations for you, so you're expected to take the calculations and talk about them. Okay, so you see there is 10 marks, you also got that bit right, 3 or 4 ratios and go with those. So think about profit, revenue, cash, receivable days, staff costs. What do they actually do? They're an advertising agency. I mean, I keep turning over the page of different questions. Advertising, right? If you know nothing about advertising, it's a people business. They just write about what you would think for an accountancy practice. It's going to be the same. You have a project, which is an advertising campaign for a client. You have junior staff, you have senior staff, and then you have partners or whatever. And it's basically the same. So what are you going to say? So you can see the revenue for the north has been declining. Cost of sales is lower for the north than it is for the west. Staff costs are pretty close actually. Operating profit, the north again is very, very low. Look how high operating profit margins are for other organisations being the east and the west, and talk about these things, okay? Right, have a look at the answer. Structure, structure, structure. You've got 10 marks, 18 minutes. You're going to compare the north with the east with the west. And she's got the numbers. You are given a ratio. The north revenue is falling. The west is rising much faster. So therefore we need to understand why that is. Do we need therefore a marketing campaign in the north to bring it back on track? Or should we be investing more money in the west because that's what's more fruitful? I can't remember from the question whether you can actually tell that or not. I don't think you probably can. But you can ask those questions in this question. Assess the performance. So more information that we need. Staff costs. Staff costs are fairly level, but in the west they seem to be lower than in the east. Okay, so maybe demographic reasons or jobs or whatever. Operating profit is rising faster than in the west, and in fact when we look at September 2012, it's the west as well. So west is the real sort of cash cow that we've got here. Right, pick a structure. Revenue. What's happening is your revenue rising fastest in the west and it's declining in the north. What do we want to say about that? Easiest way to boost revenue is marketing. Should we spend more money on marketing in the west because that's where we get the best returns, or should we spend it on the north because the north has been left alone or whatever? So I just put a summary here. Once again, what is the thing we're always looking for? We're always looking for structure. So if you wanted to, you could have used something like SWOT here and said, well, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, what's happening. I think SWOT actually would have been a good way to go here. But just as a summary of these things, I ask you to assess the recent performance by interpreting the data given in appendices 1 and 2. So therefore, what can we say? That the net income, north is the smallest, and the net income therefore is 20 over 150. Net cash flow is being produced. I mean, the revenue is falling. It's the smallest region. In the eastern region, revenue is rising. So we see revenue rising, but we've got relatively high staff costs. And in the west, we've got good growth, but we've got relatively poor working capital management. So what I did was I just did one good thing and one bad thing for each region. If you wanted to do strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, you could have done that. So the strongest ones therefore would be that revenue is rising in the east, and so on through the question. It was difficult to know, but one of the biggest problems with these things, which is different from other papers, is that I don't think that there's anything that they're looking for. When you get these ratio analysis questions at other papers, usually what's happening is that there's something in there, and the examiner wants you to find that something. I don't think there is anything here. I think you're just saying this is good, this is bad. You need to have a structure. I just did one good thing, one bad thing, and then you're saying revenue is falling in the north. We don't know why revenue is falling. It could be there's increased competition in the market. It could be that we've had some poor advertising campaigns. We need to understand more about why. The north, again, coming from Europe, the north tends to always be the least densely populated area, but it's the smallest region, so we need to evaluate and we need more information on what is the number of people that we have in this organisation, in this region, and can we invest some money and turn the thing around. In the east, we have fastest growing revenue. Is that right, margins? No, in the east we have the highest revenue and it's still rising, but in the east we also have the highest staff costs. And finally, in the west we have good levels of growth but poor working capital management, so we need to improve that working capital management. You can see there that the number of days it takes us to collect is almost doubles, but the good growth is, what's the growth, about 8 to 9% per annum. Right, you need to take each one of those points and stretch it out a bit. So in part B, therefore, you were asked to evaluate the choice of net income, and you can see the calculation of net income there. So we get this idea that north is 20, east is 65, and the west is 80. Again, I used a very, very simple structure. Remember our structure. So I just said what's good and what's bad. If you wanted to use SWOT or something like that, that would have been absolutely fine. So under the good, we said it's based on profit, which is good because therefore what we're actually looking for is for the organisation to be profitable. And it said there that overhead allocation. So you'll notice there that you've got these allocated head offices, and presumably under other costs there are local overheads as well. So we've got this concept that our overhead allocation is presumably consistent. That will never stop individual organisations or divisions within a group actually arguing about it, but we have some sort of consistent approach. So on the good basis is that we have something consistent, people know what we've got, and it's based on profit. Okay, you can talk about accounting manipulation and so on, but if there is some sort of central accounting function, and we can see that the head office function is based in the eastern offices, and the business offers a wide range of advertising services. So it doesn't say there, but presumably that the basis is consistent division to division and year on year, and that level of consistency means at least that people understand what it is that they're dealing with. Right, the bad things are that presumably allocated head office costs are not controllable, so you don't know what those costs are. Having been a manager in an organisation where we had certain uncontrollable costs, the magazine at one institute I worked in, which used to just whack through your management accounts every 3 months. These things are not controllable, so you're judging people on things which are not controllable. The second thing is it depends on what overhead allocation methods are used. It's noticeable that East earns most revenue, so people in head office presumably put the most effort into what they can see around them, and the people in the Eastern region presumably have some access to these people. So there may be some axe to grind that this thing is not particularly equitable. The third thing is it's a single measure which is based on profit alone. Profit is fine, but we also talked already about management systems and HR systems, judging people on budgets. Remember Hopwood? So profit is one measure, but there's also budget as well, which is another method. And then the third method as well is this non-profit, non-finance way of judging people. And that has a value as well. So looking at quality of service, customer satisfaction, meeting strategic goals, which are based around other things other than just dollars on a page. Right, so what I did there was my structure I took was very, very simple, and I just listed things which were good and bad. Having got good and bad, I then took those things and said, okay, we've got 5 points there, now let's expand each of those 5 points. Hopefully that will give me my 10 marks. We come back again, it is not just about going what's good and bad and stopping. You need to expand each of those points to get a pass mark. Okay? Right, so the next part of this question, and we're still on part B, remember, it was 8 marks, was evaluate the choice of net income. So looking at net income was only worth 4 marks. And then it's saying suggest other measures. Other measures. So when we identified the issues, which were 1 or 2 slides back, now what we have to do is tie this thing in together. So saying back when we were back there on slide number 9, what did we say? Well, with north, what would be a good measure? Well, we need therefore to stop this slide in profit. So looking at revenue change, looking at gross profit margins. Now, just looking at this, what's happening? Our operating profit. So with north here, you can see that our operating profit is sliding. 2011 it was 0 change, and then in 2012 it was -7%. And then also looking at your market share. When I look at these things here, are we given any information on market share? No. So what market share have we got? Is our market share declining as well? With East, it's relatively stable. So what did we hire here? Well, East had the highest revenue. So revenue changed as well, but we're continuing to sort of push home our advantage here. But more importantly, when we look at things like staff costs, East has the highest staff costs. So we'll try and push those staff costs down if at all possible. Now, remember that you're not given complete information here. If you were doing this in real life, you would know that East had higher, if this was somewhere like Britain, East would be London, so it would have higher salary costs than it would have Scotland, for example, or Cornwall, or Wales, or wherever. So this would be normal. But here we would want to look at staff costs and find out why they're the highest. Secondly, if you've got the highest staff costs, the people should be working harder. So you would want to look, therefore, at things such as staff utilisation. Staff utilisation in an advertising agency, the same as it would be in an accountancy firm, critically important. In the West, we've got revenue growth, or we've talked about revenue growth, market share as well. And so what's our market share, even though we're growing? Because you see, if you are selling virtually nothing and you sell a bit more, it will double, so it looks very impressive. So you need an absolute figure as well as a percentage change. So look at your market share there. And working capital, we identified that working capital management was poor, so therefore our performance measures will be based around working capital. For each one, revenue change. Revenue is falling in the north. We want to arrest that change. So revenue change is important because we need to stop it. So it's a strategic aim. In the east, staff costs are the highest, so we would measure staff costs as a proportion of revenue because we need to get those staff costs down in the absence of any other information. In the west, we are making sales, but we're making sales on long credit terms, so therefore we need to get those debtors days down. So therefore it's an appropriate ratio to use. Take your point, expand it, and explain why you need it. Right, I don't think they did this in the answer. I can't remember what's in the answer, but I don't think that they did. But I certainly think there will be 1 or 2 marks for saying what is the purposes of a reward system. So before you do anything else, again, structure. So this gives you something to constantly refer back to and say this is what we're doing. So just to remind you from part 1, therefore, the purposes of a reward system are recruitment and retention, fair and consistent basis of reward, and motivation. And I think that you can use that in your answer. I almost feel now I should keep talking because it's only 30 seconds on this slide. But keep that in the back of your mind. I think you get 1 or 2 marks for that. That is never going to be enough to pass, though. You need to apply it to the question. The easiest thing to do in the question is they actually give you they give you a list of things somewhere, don't you? There's actually 7 different things. Here you go. Appendix 3. Senior management, creative staff, buying staff, account management staff, and administration staff. Having got that slide, you can now apply that slide to each of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different categories, and that will more than enough get you your 7 marks. It is 7 marks. Can you go back and look again? Gosh, it is 7 marks. Okay, so using our models, bearing in mind that we've got Hopwood and the management styles, bearing in mind that we've now got that slide number 12, which tells us what the purpose of this should be. So senior management are paid a basic salary which reflects industry norms, plus a bonus dependent on the net income of their office. Well, with senior management, I'm thinking that the basic thing again is that there should be some broader spread of measures here. Certainly, fixed salary based on industry norms plus a bonus means that it's related to profits, but it's not related to greater business. It's not related to income. It's not related to staff and customer satisfaction. So I think that we could redesign that using more factors to get them at something that potentially is more suitable to the overall job that they're doing and also the overall area that they are. If you're in an area that's suffering suddenly from a great economic depression, it's a little bit unfair. But I suppose as a boss, you want that guy to take the pay cut as well. But you can do something which is more triggered towards the overall running of the organisation, I think, with the senior management. Right, looking at the creative staff, the creatives which are on a package which reflect market rates in order to recruit them at the time they were recruited. Right, notice that, at the time they were recruited. So that doesn't change. I actually worked for an organisation where people were put on fixed contracts for, let's say, 3 years, and within that 3 years they didn't get a pay rise. So people who had more experience are actually earning less than people who had more experience, than people who had less experience. Some are fixed salary, and some have a fixed element plus a bonus based on the office revenues. Right, you can do much better than that. It should reflect the current market rate for people with their experience, because there's no motivation for them to move on if they're on a fixed salary. Right, in addition to that, you would imagine that there would be some sort of bonus that would be related to their ability to bring in new business, to learn new techniques. My expectation is that with film and animation and radio and so on, that the technology is changing very, very fast. Certainly for me as a teacher, I could never imagine back in the 1980s when I started teaching that I was ever going to be sitting here making my own films. So, no account taken of new skills. We should look at this as spreading it over their ability to bring in revenue, the profitability of their individual projects, their ability to train and bring new technology and new techniques into the business. It needs to be just a lot more widespread than that. And widespread meaning spread across, again, a range of areas. To be quite honest, the buying staff looked quite sensible, didn't it? You're paid a fixed salary. You always have to pay salespeople, or you usually have to pay salespeople some sort of fixed salary element, because you want them to have some security of job. But in addition to that, they get bonuses and commission based on the amount that they've actually sold. My only comment would be is that the budget is set at HQ, which is therefore at HQ it may be a bit tough for North and West, but in general the buying staff doesn't look too bad. For the account managers, they handle the clients and develop new clients. They are paid a fixed market-based salary, but you would expect to see commissions and bonuses there. They're salesmen effectively. Salesmen you would normally expect to have some kind of commission-based element around that to motivate them and to make them sell more. Again, the level of commission should be discussed with them, and obviously they want a very high level of commission. Your organisation wants a lower level of commission, but it should be set at some fair level in between the two. Right, and finally, admin staff. Again, you're not given any information as to what admin staff are. If they are filing clerks and security guards and so on, then fair enough. If you have people who are sort of qualified chartered accountants and lawyers and God knows what else in the organisation, then you would expect them to be paid a fixed salary period, irrespective of the number of hours they work. You might also want to bring in, and this is like bring in some bonus to motivate them a bit, but there doesn't seem to be overall, without any great further degree of information, any huge problems here. Right, look at what you've done therefore. We set out this starting point as to what are we trying to achieve, which is going to get you 1 or 2 marks. It was specifically asked for, but I think that a good marker would give you something for that. But then what you're doing is that you're going to try and apply that to each of the 5 areas. You're looking within each area for one thing to say, this is paper P5, that they do some things well are perfectly normal. That was a very, very easy question, but it was done appallingly badly. Not because people didn't know the technical information, but because they did not know how to structure it up.